Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining me. Thanks for taking time out of your schedule for this third podcast from Dataclay. So happy you're here with me today. So, in this episode, many of our customers use Templator for localizing their video content into many different languages for playback in different countries. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to dive deep into the technical matters for setting up AE text layers for automatic text translation. So, in the world of software development, preparing text elements to handle multiple languages is known as internationalization. And my hope is that after learning the ins and outs of this setup, more people across the world will be able to understand your message within your renders. With that, what I want to do is I'm going to share with you a brief overview of what we're going to talk about, and then we're going to dive into the real technical stuff. So let me get my slideshow here to share with you. And here we go. Basically, what we're talking about is internationalization. And this is a common thing that happens in the world of software, as I mentioned. And so when you're doing rigging for motion graphics templates, this is something that you should, want to know, because you never know what kind of data is coming into those text layers. And so what we're going to do is show you in the context of an example that we create every new year. So these are two examples of New Year messages that we send out every New Year, where we use Templator to generate this Happy New Year, and we wish everybody a healthy and happy full 12 months coming up. And the one on the left is a very simple single line of text that is translated into multiple languages. And then on the right, it's a little bit more involved. There's a lot more magic in terms of the fireworks and all of that. But the words are split up into separate layers. And so that's a nuance that we'll talk about as well. So, here in this demonstration, I'm not going to get into the specifics about how to create the fireworks and all that magic. This is really about just preparing your data for multiple languages and then getting that data into your layers via Templator. Okay, so what we're going to do is when we start the demo, I'm going to go over the data setup. We're going to get into the Google Sheet that I've already set up, and we'll make it publicly available for y'all to add to your own drive, and you can use it with Templator. And we basically learn how to use the Google Translate formula and what country codes are, and how to actually get the translation from your native language into a target language. Okay. And then what we're going to do is we're going to cover some things about fonts and characters. And font technology is a very deep technology, but it's not so, the technicalities of fonts aren't so widely known amongst designers. And so what I want to do is kind of go over some tools that will enable you to inspect fonts, understand how to use them in code, and also how to choose the right font that balances the need for the language against the design that you have decided to go with in your templates. Then we're also going to go into the project itself. I will give you a guided tour about how the project is set up, and we will show you the ins and outs of data rigging and mapping and things like that. And then what we're going to do is go right into the expressions that you'll need to guarantee that the glyphs that you need for your language are going to appear on those text layers. Okay, so this is basically understanding how to get data from your spreadsheet or from Templator's data source into expression code. And there's a tried and tested technique that really works quite well. And then we're going to go into previewing and how that works, and understanding how to account for, changing character counts, changing word counts, and also understanding what happens when you switch from left to right script to right to left script. Okay, so we'll go into that. And then finally, we'll wrap up with spot checking and why that's important with localization, because it allows you to quality assure very quickly. And you can, I don't know if this is immediately obvious, but with spot checking, you can actually use, you can render out still images as spots, but you can also render out work area, or sorry, markers that have duration. You can render those out as spot check movies. So we're going to take a look at that. Okay, so with that, what we're going to go ahead and do is I'm going to go and dive into After Effects. So let me go ahead and just share my entire screen. I'm going to make sure that my do not disturb is on so we don't get disturbed during the course of this. And let me go ahead and hit share screen. And I'm going to do the entire screen, and we're going to share this one, and we should be right into here. Okay, so just to verify, I just want to make sure that we can see that, and it looks like we can, so great. Okay, this project file is already rigged. I've got a few or several comps, but this is the final render comp. We can see that it's got the double brace here. When we have the double brace, that means that templater will use this as the default fallback target. So we're going to call that, we call that final render. And you can see that it's really basic in terms of what's going on here. I just have a background, and then of course I have the scene. And if I double click on this, this is where all three of those elements are being animated. So you can see that the happy, new, and year all have keys here. If I open them up, they all have keys. And what I've done here is I've animated them so that they look like they are fireworks. So again, as I said earlier, this isn't really about the magic of the fireworks. This is just a basic bare bones example. Then what I have is not just the animation of the actual terms, but I have this language name that comes up every time we see this these three words here. Okay, so this will tell us what language we're actually looking at. Now, if I go into the happy comp, you can see I've got just this text layer here. Likewise, if I go into the new pre-comp, that's this text layer. And if I go into the, I keep going back there, the year, you can see I've got this one. Okay, so these are three separate text layers. And you know, that's kind of like the basic of how it's constructed. Now, I'm going to, before I show you, you know, how the rigging actually operates, I'm going to show you the spreadsheet that we will be connecting data, the templater to. And that's this guy right here. So we have this Happy New Year 2023 demo. We have three tabs here. We have something called HNY, which is, these are all ones that we are going to, you know, that are guaranteed to work on my machine because I've already installed the fonts. And then what I've done here is I've grouped the Middle Eastern and Asian fonts here, just for the sake of understanding more, you know, the left to right and the right to left script stuff that we'll go over. And then I've got this uninstalled, which means that these fonts here are not installed. However, yesterday, as I was preparing, I did install this one. And so we'll look at what happens in AE when you do not have the font that's installed, that is needed for specific glyphs here. Okay, so let's go back up and take a look at the data. And what I've got here is something called, I've got this column called language code, language name, and the main term. And so this is what I want to go over real quickly. The language code refers to a small abbreviation that Google Translate needs for the Google Translate formula to work. So I have this row number 2 is my English row because that's my native language. And you can see here that when I click on this cell, this is the formula for Google Translate. And if I just kind of hover over it, you can see that Google Sheets gives me this kind of completion or function signature. And here what it's saying is, you know, it wants the first parameter of this Google Translate formula is the text that I want to translate. The second one is the language that this is written in. And so EN represents English. And then the third one is the language that we want to translate the text string into. It's the target language. Okay, so you can see here that if I look at D, column D is the language code column. The language name is this is just an identifier for us. You can see there's no formula here. But then here, each one of these cells in this column, in the main term column, has the Google Translate, has the Google Translate formula. And all of these below the row 2, all of them are referring to this cell here for that string for the first parameter of the Google Translate. And the way you do that is you use these $ symbols here. So if you want the reference for every subsequent row to always look at one cell, you use these $ symbols in front of the letter and number nomenclature, what they call A1 notation. So here we can see that, for Japanese, I'm referencing Happy New Year, which is F2. It is English is the native language. That's where I'm translating from. And then D3 refers to JA, which is Japanese. So that's how I can do it. That's how I can get the language that I want. So if I were to just, for example, let's go ahead and go down here, and we're going to say, for the main term, we're going to say equals Google Translate. We're going to do that. And we're just going to say, how are you? And we are going to make sure that that is the English language. And then we want to translate it into Spanish, which I believe is ES, and just hit enter. And there we go. It's como estás, which definitely means how are you in Spanish. Okay. So that's Google Translate in a nutshell. Now, you can use the A1 notation to refer to different cells to make it very easy to translate at the same time. So, for example, let's just say I had these 5 deleted. So I lost that data, right? Well, I can go here and just drag down, and it's going to replace because it has all of that information. It's referring to this cell right here. And when you drag down, it increases this the last reference here. So that's a really nice way to get your translations quickly in your sheet. Now, I will say that it is not recommended to necessarily use these translations in production. This is really good for a starting point. You might want to have your translator on your team look at the data before you actually go to production. But this is a really nice, simple way to begin the process of setting up your data. Okay. Now, the other question is that you might have is, where do we get all these language codes, right? Where do these come from? Because if I click on here, you can see they're literally, somebody just typed them out, and I typed them out. But if you're so interested, you can go to the handy Google application and just say Google Translate language codes, and you can see here language support, cloud translation, and boom, here's Google's official documentation. And you can see that these codes are what are known as ISO 639, which is an international standard organization that sets these codes up. So pretty much operating system manufacturers and application manufacturers are going to have these codes if there's any translation going on. So basically, you choose which languages you want to translate into. You grab the code and you put it in your spreadsheet in a column. And so we've done the legwork of, these aren't all of the languages that that Google supports. Like, there's more languages, but these are some of the more popular languages that are spoken on planet Earth. So you can see, though, that we've typed this in, and we've actually used an English label to identify what these 2 character codes, actually these language codes, map to. Okay, so you can, again, we're happy to provide this to you. We'll post links to our social channels about getting this so that you can get on your way very quickly. So the other thing to note, though, is that in some cases, when the Google Translate does its job, the term Happy New Year is 3 words in English. However, if we go down to Japanese, it is 1 term. If we go to French, it is 2 terms. And in some cases, it is four terms, for example, in Greek or Vietnamese. So the question is, how do you parse the string so that you can divide up the terms in the case of having three separate text layers? That's a critical thing to think about when you're doing translation, because sometimes it takes very more words than not to translate a message. So what I've done here, and this is a technique that I've used, is I use something called arrays, and I split strings by spaces. And what that allows you to do is it allows you to count how many terms are in the actual thing. And then you can say, okay, I've got a first term, happy, a second term, new, third term, year, and then a final term. And in some cases, the final term is going to be more than one word because we only have three layers that we're dealing with. So if I look at this one, which is Japanese, if I go into this formula here, what's happening is what I'm saying is split F3, which is this thing, this split it by, split the string by spaces, and then give me the first one from the beginning to the end. I'm sorry, yeah, from the beginning to the end. And I believe that's how it works in terms of the, I'm not sure why it says row and column here, but basically what happens is in this case, it's going to give me the first word. So all of these, you can see no matter where I go on the rows, it's grabbing that first term. The only thing that's changing is the reference, which is the F column, right? So that's how you can get the first term. And then the second term, it's a little bit more complex. And the whole if error thing is about making sure that if there is not anything, if the splitting of the array of the string does not produce a second term, then it's going to just enter in a space. Okay, so that's basically what that if error is all about. So sometimes when you ask the formula to split a string by spaces, nothing will come back, and that's considered an error. And in that case, do something, and we just want to have a blank space. And so the same goes for the third term. And then the final term is a little bit more complex. I'm not going to get into the real specifics of this because it is complex, but I will say what we do here in general is we reference this term count here. So in this column, what we've done is we have what's called count array, and we split the main term by spaces, and it tells us, okay, well, this is how many items are in that split array. And in this case, Japanese only has one, and Chinese has one, and French has two, and so on and so forth, right? This one, Hindi, has four. So in this final term, what we do is we say, okay, if the count, if G20, this item, is greater than 3, because we only have 3 layers to work with, what we're going to do is we're going to split the whole thing up, and then we're going to find out the last 2 terms, and those are what we're going to use. Okay, so I'm not, I can get into the deep specifics, but these days you can go to ChatGPT and ask AI to come up with these formulas for you. But the point that I'm trying to make is you have to be able to look at the translated phrase that you want and then break it down into the way that you might want to animate it in your After Effects project. And inside of this, in the example that I showed you here with at the very beginning, this guy, this first one is only a singular layer, so you don't have to do any of that string parsing. It's just one layer. And what I've done here in this project is use text animators with transparency and animating the text animator on the word index. And so that's why it works, because it's just using After Effects is doing the legwork of splitting up the animation. In this case, it's a much more involved, on the right side, it's a much more involved project. And so we've got to figure out how to prepare the data for that purpose. Okay, so let's go back into the data and just talk a little bit more about what's going on here. So we have the final term, and then we move over to this column here, which is really, really important. This I've called postscript, and these are names that After Effects needs for the expression code to change the font on the fly when Templator does the reversioning task. So you can see, though, that in some cases, for example, this font here, this Tamil, I know nothing about Tamil, and I should prefix everything by saying I am not a language expert. I have no expertise in probably only two languages. But I would say that this font, these characters, may not be in Montserrat, which is where the designer built. This is how the designer built the After Effects project. So if I take a look, I clicked on this happy text layer. You can see the character is set to Montserrat, but because Montserrat does not have these not strange characters, but these Tamil characters, we have to switch the font at runtime when Templator is doing the reversioning. Okay, so I'm going to show you all about that. And then if we scroll down even further past the postscript column, these are just some other phrases that I translated, and then I've got this language name native, which refers to the name of the language in the native language. So you can see Italiano instead of Italian, and Espanol instead of Spanish, and Portuguese instead of Portuguese. So that's kind of the data. And what I want to show you now is how to get that data into the project. So let's take a look. All right, so we're back in After Effects, and I've got this happy, I'm going to work with this happy text layer here, and you'll see here that the text name is first term, which should match the first term name here. Okay, so that's rule number one. Rule number two is we've got the we've got the Templator settings effect applied. Okay. And the thing about applying the Templator settings effect is you get the scale factor, and you get alignment and all of that. And so what I've done here is I have said that no matter how many characters this text layer becomes, I want this text layer to always be 66% of the real estate in this containing composition. And then if I look at new and go here and look at its effect, and I go to the Templator settings effect here and go to the layout, you can see it's also 66%. And I'm initializing these all to the center, meaning no matter how After Effects changes up the layer after the characters come in, it's going to align it to the center. And then here, what I've got is the same business. I hit the year, got 66%, and it's aligning to the center. So when we go back up to the scene, what I'm going to go ahead and do is just solo out one of these guys. And we're looking at the word happy, and you can see that I'm not animating the text layer. I'm animating a pre-composition of the text layer. And that is a critical thing to remember, because you never know how big your text character count is going to be, how many characters are going to be in there. So you want to animate pre-comps so that you're guaranteed as a designer to know the extent of where that text string is going to end up. Okay, so when I unsolo it and play it back, we can see that we're all of these three items are pre-comps, and all the animation, the transparency, all of that's happening on the pre-comp. Nothing is happening in here except for the fact that we've got the Templator settings, and we also have some expression code. Okay, so that is effectively the way that you map the data in there. So I'm just going to back up to the scene, and let's go to this marker here. And what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that we're connected to the correct sheet. And so I've got my Google spreadsheet set up here, and I'm going to click on the HNY because that's the one that has the more popular languages. We're going to link to there. English is the beginning, but I'll click to the beginning to make sure that the index is correct on the transport. Then I'm going to advance, and there is Japanese. And so you can see that new and year are blank; they're empty because in that text, in the data setup in the string parsing, there was no second and final term. If I go to the end, here's the China, or sorry, if I advance, there's Chinese, again, one term, French, two terms, Italian, two terms, Dutch, two terms, Tamil, two terms, and then here we go with Spanish, back to the three term. And so if we go to a fourth one, or one that has four, which is all the way down here, for example, let's go to one that is actually got Latin, so we can understand what we're talking about. We have on the third, we don't actually map third term. We're going to map final term. So this is going to be the first term, the second term, and then the final term. So if we go to row 27, the way I do this is I just hit 27 here, and then I go to the beginning, and I'm guaranteed to get that. And you can see that this final term on the year has both of those that concatenated final tail of the translation. So again, very important to know your After Effects setup and then also prepare the data for that setup. Okay, so what we're going to go ahead and do now is we are going to talk a little bit about the expression stuff. So in the postscript, I mentioned that here are the names of the fonts. And so what I want to do is back up and talk about font technology for a little bit. And it's kind of strange, but your operating system isn't going to have the best tools for inspecting fonts. It's just it just doesn't have the feature set that we need as people who are designing for translations and localization. So I have a particular tool that I like. I'll point a link to it at the end of this, on our social channels after this is all said and done. It's this PopChar. It's both Windows and Macintosh compatible, so you don't have to worry about does it work on my system. But basically, what this is a very advanced character inspector, but also gives you a lot of information about the fonts that are installed on your machine. So what I want to go ahead and do is I'm going to go ahead here and just search for Montserrat, and it comes up here. And I want to show you that in this app, we have what are called Unicode blocks. And the Unicode blocks in this app in particular, I have not found a different app available today that organizes glyphs according to these nice little groupings with labels. So if I open this, this shows me all of the Latin-based fonts that are available in Montserrat. This means that a designer like you and me spent time designing what this crazy character, AE, ligature looks like for the Latin character Unicode block, okay? They also went ahead and designed all the stuff for the Cyrillic languages, which are like Ukrainian or Russian or, that part of the world. And so sometimes when you go look for a font that you want to use and you want to translate into, the glyphs do not exist. So let's take a look. Arabic doesn't give me anything. It has this blank space. I mean, that's not useful if I want to use Montserrat to translate into Arabic. So you have to know the fonts that you are going to use in your design and what languages they support. And your best bet is to inspect the font using a tool like this, like PopChar. And it also shows you like, well, what else did they do? Like, what else did the designer do? Like, it comes with all this stuff and this stuff. And we can go into the standard Mac font book or the Windows fonts application, but you're not going to get that same level of detail. You do get some information, but it's not organized as well, and it's difficult to know in some cases. So what we can do is search for Montserrat here, and this is not very helpful. Does it support Arabic by looking at here? No, I can't fold the Unicode blocks. It's very difficult for me to know. And so you really do have to know. Now, you can do something where you go into this I and you can say language support. Oh, great. So it's supposedly going to support all of these languages, but you can see here on the A's, there is no Arabic. And we know that because the Montserrat here, there is no Arabic as well here. Well, I don't know. and this is the regular one. So the Arabics, you see, there's nothing there. And then here in the language support, it's not there. So you really do have to know whether or not your fonts that you're going to use inside of your reversioning project are going to be supported. So that's that. That's one aspect. Another aspect is this idea of a PostScript name. So the question is, where do we get these PostScript names from? Okay, and why do we have to use a PostScript name? Why not the font file name or something like that? And the reason is because fonts work on both Mac OS and Windows and Linux and another operating system like your, I don't know, Apple Watch or what have you. But a PostScript name is a universal identifier for that font so that software can read it. So basically, if we go back into PopChar here and we go into Montserrat, what we can do is click here and then click on font info. And this is going to tell us the PostScript name right here. And not only that, it shows us exactly where the file is, which Fontbook does not do either. So it'll actually bring up the file itself. So that is a important identifier that you'll need for using it in After Effects. Now, I will say that After Effects is coming a long way with regards to what's called variable fonts. But when you install a font, which I'll show you later when we get to the uninstalled font issue, you have to install what are called the static fonts. Okay, and I'll show you the process and the workflow for doing that. Okay, so let's go ahead and go back into After Effects and see where that PostScript identifier actually ends up. So what I've done in the project is I've created a pre-comp that's called globals. Okay, and the globals is a very simple comp. There's no animation. I've got the language name, and then I've got the PostScript string as in the sheet mapped to here. So these two here have the templator settings effect, and you can see the name is PostScript, and then the lang name is coming in here. So if I go back to the beginning, you can see this is going to say English, and I want Montserrat black for that. I go advanced, this is Japanese, and I want the Nato Sans JP black, and so on and so forth. Okay, this is Chinese, which is Nato Sans TC black. So inside of the text layer, what I do is I take I go into the text, I go into my source text here, and I enable it so that I can actually write the expression here. Okay, and so let's break down this expression a little bit. So this expression is really saying, I want to take this text layer's source text, I'm going to style it, and I want to use the set font functionality. And I'm going to pass in a string to the set font function. Okay, this is evaluated. This portion inside of this set font parentheses is evaluated before this is evaluated. Okay, meaning that this value is coming from the globals comp, the PostScript layer, and I want the text, source text of that layer. Okay, so let's take a look. I have this bon, which I think means good in French, and if I uncheck this for the expression, I lose that data. I lose the PostScript mapping. If I enable it, boom, I get my Montserrat black. And you can even see in the character palette here what happens. So take a look at that as I undo, redo. Taking it off, putting it back on. Taking it off, putting it back on. Okay. So when I go to a language, if we look at the data, I can see that I'm in, I don't know, let's go this one, which is Swedish, and then I'm going to go to Telugu. Okay, this is definitely a Latin-based language, which is Swedish, and then I'm going to go into this one, which is an Asian language. So I'm going to go 17 to 18. So I go here, 17, and then 18, and I'm going to go to the beginning, and that is got which I think means good in Swedish. And then you can see that if I bring up the globals, which I'll actually do, let's go ahead and create um, a new viewer. I don't know where I thought I was able to create a new view. Oh, here we go. And then I'm going to lock this down. That one's locked down, but I'm going to change this one to the globals here, and then lock this one. So if I now go back, or I'm at 17. It's at Swedish at Montserrat Black. I advance, and I get this Telugu Nado Sans Telugu Black. Now, if I go back into the Happy Comp and I uncheck that, that is not going to work for those fireworks design where the thickness of the typeface matters for the effect to work. And so that's the other thing that I want to mention is that your design, however you've chosen your artistic direction, the typeface obviously matters, but all the languages in the world are not going to be supported by that awesome font that you want, or that you want for the production. So you have to figure out, well, what fonts are available for that language, right? And so that's kind of what I want to show you now. So without having Montserrat support Telugu, basically what happens is you have to figure out where to get those fonts. So one of the places that I go to is to fonts.google.com, and of course there is fonts available from Adobe, but with Google, I have found that they are putting a lot of energy into the internationalization aspect of fonts. They actually have at fonts.google.com this font family called Nato, and it's a project that they are heading up to make sure that you get a sans serif and you get a serif, and but for different languages. And so you can see that there's all these languages. So if I literally just type in Telugu here, you can see it's got this design for the sans. But let's actually go back. Let's Telugu, and there's a serif version. Looks like this. It's a little different from the Arial MS Unicode. And so what I've decided to do in terms of the project, in terms of the design, is that I would need the sans one. And what's nice about this is it has a ton of different weights. And so a lot of the, fonts that are international fonts, meaning like they're meant for languages that may not be as common as English or Spanish or Portuguese, something like that. It's going to be difficult to find them at different weights. And so you have to figure out the resources that you can go to. At Adobe, at fonts.adobe.com, there's something that you can do to kind of look at when you're choosing a font, okay? Let's say we want kind of a real stylistic font, like something that's really, interesting. So if we go to all fonts so that I can turn on the filtering, you can go down to here. This will give you all the languages that they have. And I will say they don't even have some for some languages that are on those Unicode, the 2-letter codes from Google. So you really have to, figure out how you're going to get a font when Adobe doesn't support it. And that's why Google is kind of like this a nice resource. But let's just say we wanted to do Finnish, that we want to do fonts for Finland. And here you can see like this Gabriella. Let's take this one, which is a very unique font. You can go down and scroll. You can find out about the designer, which I think is great. Type designers don't get enough credit. Then you can even scroll down further. And here we go. Glyph support and stylistic filters. Look at this. For the desktop, which is what is required for After Effects, you are looking at a limited set of glyphs. Now, I can say for a fact that Fair Cozy is not going to spend time designing glyphs for every single language on the planet. It's just not feasible. And that's why there are some languages that definitely have a certain popularity, and that is why they choose certain ones that work. So if I wanted to use this awesome, style in my particular template, um, but I wanted to, I don't know, translate into Armenian, can't do it with this font. So you got to find out. And even if you go here to all fonts and you look at the drop down here, there is not, I don't even believe, oh no, they have some Armenian fonts. That's great. So here you can see this fit variable, highly stylized font. Uh, don't really know what's going on with it, but if I scroll down, these are the designers, and you can see, you scroll down and boom. Even here it says somehow I don't even see. Oh no, here it is, Armenian. Okay, so you really do need to inspect the font before you download it. After you inspect the font, after you download the font, go to it and look. So like, let's take a one that I have here that it's installed. It's stylized. I don't know what Modak is really, but if we go to the characters of current font, you can see highly limited. Highly limited. I got 225 glyphs on the Latin. I've got a great number of ligatures for the Latin, character set. I've got, some general punctuation, and I've got one Greek font, which is Pi, and so on and so forth. But I'm not going to be able to use this font in Armenian or in Tamil, or there's a ton of different languages out there that it's kind of a discovery thing, which is something that I like to do. But anyway, so when we cycle through, what's happening is this expression, when Templator is injecting the new data into the layer, it's actually evaluating this expression and changing the font style on the fly. Okay, so that is effectively what that is. Now, the other thing to note is that the left to right and right to left. Now, Adobe has been using a text engine prior to 2022, AE 2022, that did not actually support left to right and right to left very intelligently. You could do it, but it was like you had to set After Effects into a left to right mode for Middle Eastern languages, or a left to right, it would be English and Latin, or a right to left for the Middle Eastern languages. In After Effects 2022 and after, it's now very intelligent. However, one thing that you have to note is, if you have mixed left to right and right to left script in the data, you have to make sure that the paragraph is actually set to right to left. So in fact, in my opinion, in my experience, setting your text layers when you're doing localization to the right to left is better and more robust than setting it from left to right. So what we can do is take a look. I've created this bare data composition here, and this is just to show you the singular term here. So if I advance, I'm seeing Japanese, and here's the Chinese, and then here's French, and it's all together in one composition. Now, if I go ahead and go to the sheet and I scroll down all the way to the end for main term here, and let's just say I'm going to copy Hebrew. So I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to go down here, and I'm going to paste it. And it's not there. So I'm going to do paste value, paste special values only. And so there's my right to left script. And so in Hebrew, you read from the right side to the left side. But let's say that I want to have some English baked into here as well. So what I can do is I'm just going to type in Dataclay. Okay, so what I have here is the right to left script here, and then a left to right script there. So After Effects 2022 and above does this really, really nicely if your paragraph setting is set to right to left. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is click this. I've made sure that my paragraph is set to right to left. And I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I'm on row 89. So I'm going to go ahead and just type this to 89. And just to save on memory, I'm just going to go to 88 here. And then if I go to the right to the end, boom, it looks great. I've got the same setup as it is inside of the cell. Okay, so that's a I know that doesn't seem like a big deal, but in the world of Adobe and text engines, it's actually very complicated to do this kind of thing. Okay, so if though I had this set to left to right, it's not, it's you can read it. It does have the correct direction for both languages. I've got left to right here and then right to left here. But if I look at how the data is represented in the cell, it's totally different. I've got the Dataclay on the left, and then I've got the Shana Tova, Happy New Year on the right. When in fact it should be the Hebrew on the left and then the English on the right. So that's just something that I want to point out, is that when you're dealing with text layers specific to internationalization, make sure that the text layer is set to right to left. And you're guaranteed that the data as it comes through templater from Sheets or from even a text file is going to match perfectly. Okay, so let's go back and kind of back up here. And we're going to go back. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to look at what happens when the font is not installed. So I did this one, Amharic, which I believe is a Ethiopian script. But let's take a look at Georgian. So what we're going to do is I've got this main term here, and this is the script for Georgian, which I'm not sure exactly, where it's actually from or what age. Apologies for anybody who writes in this language. But what I'm going to show you is that if I go into the bare data here, and I'm going to go ahead and connect templater to that uninstalled fonts sheet, I'm going to make sure that the first one is row 4. So we're going to go row 4. And if I go to the beginning, oh, it looks like this one actually is in Unicode, Arial Unicode MS. Okay, so that's how that's going to look. Let's advance to see. So Khmer is not even available. This language, even for the Myriad or the Arial MS Unicode, it's just not available. The glyphs do not exist. So what do you do when this happens? Because it will happen if you're doing this kind of project. You go and you find something that will work. You go and find a font that has these characters, these glyphs. So inside of Nado, or inside of Google Fonts on the Nado project, I'm going to type in, and we're going to use the serif one, and I'm going to download the family. So we're going to wait patiently, and we're going to go ahead and open it up, unzip it. And I want to show you something that's pretty critical, and that is that you get this variable font right away when you unzip, okay? The problem is that for this kind of stuff to work with the PostScript identifiers, this is not going to work, at least for not now. And I haven't tested AE 2024, which just got released, by the way. So what you want to do is you want to install the static files, okay? So you're going to take all of these files, bring up your font book, which is, and we're going to go to the downloads again. Where's the downloads here? Here's the Khmer, and we're going to select all of them, drag them in. Okay, so now it's in here, and they've been installed. Here they are. And if I bring up PopChar, which I really prefer, and I do Nado, there they are. Let's see. The Latin are certainly going to be there. Here they are. Southeast Asian is what they group them as. So there they are. So now what I'm going to go ahead and do is go back to the data inside of the spreadsheet. and I'm going to look at the font info, and I can see that if I click on the font here, the PostScript name is regular, uh, and there's condensed, regular, and I've got, let's see, a bold. So I'm gonna do this not a sans, and then maybe bold, and I do that. Okay, so I go to bold and I grab that, and I'm going to paste it right into. I'm sorry, this is kind of weird, but I'm going to paste it right into there, and I'm going to just. Okay, so that's Nato Sam's Khmer bold. So let's go back into AE, and we're going to refresh, and the characters should show up, and there they are. So now I have to make a decision. Is bold good enough? I don't know. Maybe it's going to work for the effect of the fireworks, but what I'm going to go ahead and do is say, okay, I've got the not just bold, but I'm going to take a look at what else I have. I'm going to try black. So then I go here and I copy this, and I do the black, and I go AE, and I load, and a little thicker, so that might make the firework effect work a little bit better. So that's why that when you encounter an issue where even if Arial, what is it, Arial Unicode MS does not have the font available, or the glyphs available, then you can you can certainly find the font that is specific to that language. Okay, now let's step back and just kind of look at spot checking, and then we'll wrap this up. So in this example, I've got, here's the final render that I'm going to render out, and I want to just render out, let's say, row 2 through I don't know, let's do 25. So that'll be 25 outputs. I go into Templator's preferences. In the spot check area, I'm going to load the settings and module templates, and I'm going to choose PNG sequence. So I want to output PNGs on my spot checks. And what I'm seeing here in this particular final render is I've got this marker called HNY local. And so what happens is this name here gets appended to the outputs. And before I do that, I should also connect to the actual sheet, which is HNY, instead of the uninstalled ones, because that's the one we're going to work with. And let's go back just to make sure we got the data. And now let's go ahead and click, or let's open up our destination, which is this. And we're just going to look at list view, and we're going to delete all of this content in here. And we should see, once we hit spot check, we should see AE outputting for each place in that marker. And I'm not sure what is going on, why it didn't actually write anything to here. Oh, that's weird. So they're all there. That was very weird. And I hit icons, and let's go ahead and just clean up by name. And now, as far as quality assurance goes, I can pass this over to quality assurance, and I say, hey, this is the Portuguese one, this is the Indonesian, German, Croatian, and you might want to even see, instead of still images at key points. This is a really cool technique with spot checking, which I'm not sure people know about. But what we're going to do is basically create a marker that has duration. And the way you do that in After Effects is you hold the Option key on the marker and you click and drag. And what's going to happen when you do spot check is it's going to actually render out the duration of the marker instead of just a still image. So we're going to reduce the amount that we're going to output because it's going to take longer because there's more frames. So let's just do 2 to 10. And what we're going to go ahead and do is go back into the preferences, go into here, into the load settings and module templates. I have to click that every time, and then choose which output module I want to use for the spot checks. I'm going to choose this QuickTime 422, click OK. And let's go back into here. And what we're going to do is open up the destination. Yeah, empty. And we're going to do spot check. So what's going to happen now is you're going to see the spot check. It's not going to be a PNG. It's going to be a movie. And so when I go back into the output, we should see this being created for every language. So sometimes you might want to see, brief clips of your output instead of, the singular image. Okay, so I'm going to wrap it up there. I know this has been a lot of information, and so I'm opening up the floor to questions. And I thank you very much for hanging in there, and thank you for watching. So I'm not sure again why this isn't coming up, but I think that's a Mac issue. Let's see. Yeah, I'm not sure why they're not coming up. The renders did happen. I just don't understand that. So, here they are. So it's very weird, but there you go. Okay, so Alan, Alan's with us on this broadcast, and if there's any questions that I can answer, I'm happy to do it.
We did have a question earlier about. Sure. Is there a way to specify a font per row? And I know that opens up a can of worms, but you might want to address, for example, you're showing how you can assign fonts to each job. If you wanted to be able to assign different fonts for each of the terms, I know you'd have to adjust the spreadsheet to add those cells, but do you want to talk a little bit about the limitations of After Effects when it comes to trying to mix fonts with text blocks and that type of thing?
You mean like paragraphs instead of?
Yeah, because if it means the row, if he's thinking in terms of this gets into the issue of when you're designing with different fonts, how, what are some best practices in After Effects, and where do you need to realize the limitations?
Yeah, so I mean, as far as using, a text box, it's not going to be any different than just hitting a text layer thing there. If you want to do different fonts inside of a text box, like you wanted these characters to be different, currently I don't believe that is supported from the data side, from the scripting side, which is what Templator's panel is going to be using. I believe you can do that here inside of the UI, but I'm not 100% sure quite yet if that's exposed. I have to do some research on that, but I also think that I know for a fact that currently Templator is not going to allow for this, unfortunately. So what you can do is you can create multiple text layers and then stitch them together using the Templator settings effect layout parameters. And you can, for example, you would say, attachment, and you can attach to a layer, and you can attach on the left edge, and you can basically effectively have multiple text layers that are kind of chained. And then inside of the data, you would have to have PostScript -1, which would map to the first text layer, and then another PostScript -2, which would be another set of PostScript names mapped to the second layer. So unfortunately, it's unfortunate, but right now it's not easy to do multiple fonts on the same text layer with Templator's auto injection. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think that's a good answer. And also, just so that users know, Adobe did in the most recent release of After Effects, they had it in beta, and now they've released it in the current release, a number of new scriptable text adjustments. I don't believe that they've done anything that addresses this particular issue, but all of those new adjustments, are available for scripting with Templator. We don't have anything natively, using those new, right? But they are available, and Templator in general, I want people to know that, you can use it with beta copies of After Effects.
Yeah, and if you did want to, I mean, if you had the scripting knowledge, you can always use the event scripts here, and you can say after the layer processing, after the layers update by templater, you can choose a JSX script to to run so that your own code can hook into templater's reversioning algorithm. So that's one way to handle it. And then I will say that also a lot of they're going to be supporting, I think beta might even have it, the variable fonts are going to be supported as well. It might even be in 2024. I'm not 100% sure, but we need to do a little bit of work to support the variable fonts. So for this demo, I've shown just the static ones. Are there any other questions? Anything?
There are no other questions currently.
Okay.
I do think that you were talking about uh, as we were doing a rehearsal, you were mentioning how the variable fonts uh, present a challenge. Uh, when using the Google Sheets and this method. I don't know if you want to dig in on that any further, or just leave it at
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the thing is when you install a variable font, you can actually see. I don't. The problem is I don't have one installed. But when you go to the PostScript name, it's got this thing where you get the PostScript name dash and then like a weight, and then you'll have like an underscore. And when you use that in an expression in 2023 at least, when you use that kind of identifier, it doesn't work. It doesn't do anything currently. So that's the issue, is that because the way that all the weights are packed into this one file, the PostScript method that I've got set up here, it does not work, which is unfortunate. But as we continue to develop Templater, we will look to support the variable font weights.
I also want to add that any questions that arise that aren't sufficiently covered here in this video, please contact Dataclay support@dataclay.com, and we're happy to help users with the breadth of knowledge that our support team has
Yeah,
over the
absolutely.
years of helping customers with localization.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. So no more questions. I just want to thank y'all for coming and for learning a little bit, and hopefully this will help y'all with your future projects, getting the message out there to all different parts of the world. So thanks again. And I do want to say our next episode we'll have a guest who is an avid user of Templater, doing some really creative things, particularly with automatic editing and motion graphics. So it's a kind of an approach of using Templater or data to cut in certain clips and use Templater for graphic overlays. And so it's an interesting. I think the body of work that this one user, his name is Keith Hopkin, is created is really remarkable, and I'm happy to bring him on. So please join us for the next one, which is later this month. So we'll post more details on that as well, and we will also post how to get this project file and the data from Google Sheets on our social channels. So thank you all very much, and yeah, until next time.